Hello creeps! Andy here, and today I have my reading wrap up for May. And my books are all over the place. Let me get them in order really quick and then we'll go through all the books that I read. Hold on, I'm gonna have to look at Goodreads because I did not keep good track of everything in my reading journal this month. So here are the books that I read this month. I think I read 10 books, but a lot of them were shorter. I definitely didn't read time and page wise the amount that I typically would read. But anyways, I did read a lot of great books. Honestly, most of them were like 4-star reads for me because they were just perfect for what I needed at that time. However, we got to start with Irvin Welsh's Skag Boys. This was a 5 out of 5-star book for me. I just did a whole video on this, so I'm not going to go into detail. It's just a group of friends that fall into addiction and kind of how their life plays out from there. It's a really fantastic read, and I highly recommend watching that video if you're interested in learning more about that book. But let's just move on. So the next one that I read was The Last Town by Blake Crouch. Now this is number 3 in the Wayward Pines series. And I gotta be honest with you, this one I did not like as much as the other one, certainly as much as the first one. So basically the story behind these books is that there's a man named Ethan Burke and he's going into this town of Wayward Pines to try to find because he works for like the Secret Services or something, and 2 agents have disappeared in this town. So he is sent after them to try to find them, and as he's driving there, he gets into a car accident. He wakes up inside of the town. He can't contact his family. No one will really tell him what's going on, and it seems like either they're trying to keep him inside the town or something else outside of the town. So that's the basis of, honestly, the first novel. I don't want to give too much away in case you guys haven't read the series. But I think my issue with this one, and it's not that it's well written, and it's not that I don't love Blake Crouch, and it's not that I didn't find it interesting, but the first one, what I just told you, that synopsis, was the entire first book. And the second book was really slow and didn't have like a crazy amount of things going on. He was just kind of investigating the town more. And right when the third one takes off, like at the end of the second book, you're like, oh, shit's about to hit the fan. It's about to go wild. But the problem I had with this one is that there are probably 5 or 6 major life-changing, crazy things that are happening in this book, and they all just magically get resolved in this 280-page book. Like, it just seemed like everything, no matter how extreme or crazy it was, especially at the end of the second book, like how crazy things were about to get, things just kind of resolved way too easy for me, and it wasn't as gratifying as reading the first one. So that's honestly how I felt. And I don't know which one I liked more, the second or the third one, because there were things that I liked and didn't like about both of those books. I guess not that it's not that I didn't like them, it's just that the second one seemed really mild compared to the first book, and then this one seemed so extreme and everything was resolved so quickly that I kind of wish that the second one and the third one were arranged a little bit differently. So anyways, that is how I feel about this one. Please do not hate me for saying that, because I know a lot of you guys are huge Blake Crouch fans, and I am too. And I know that you guys love Wayward Pines. I've gotten a lot of comments about how much you guys like them. And it's not that I didn't enjoy this book, but I was dissatisfied with certain things in it. And that's just, you know, my honest opinion. Still, I think worth a read. And honestly, the book ends, and I think this one was published a bit ago, 2014. So I was even thinking at the end, I think that it was resolved well, whatever. Like, I liked the ending of it, but I do think that if more books were written, then I would feel less dissatisfied with that book. Not saying that there needs to be or anything, but at least the issues could continue to play out and it wouldn't feel so, I don't know, like everything just got wrapped up in this perfect bow, and I don't know. So anyways, next I read Final Girls by Riley Sager, and I think a lot of these were actually from the book haul of this month, but it's so funny too because I'm like, I'm gonna get a bunch of thrillers and just be able to have thrillers to read, you know, for like little downtime books between other stuff. And I read so many thrillers this month. It was one of those months where my mind was so stuck on something else that I couldn't even read, and I had to stop every few pages and be like, oh dang, I wasn't paying attention, and go back. And that does not happen to me very often, but this was one of those months. So I read a ton of thrillers, and unfortunately most of the thrillers that I do have. So I guess another book haul is coming soon, so I have to restock up on thrillers. But as far as this one goes, Final Girls, it's about these 3 final girls in real life, like in real life in the book. They have survived this horrendous thing where a bunch of their friends were murdered. They're unrelated in different cities, in different states, and throughout different decades even. But they come to know each other, or like have contact each other in whatever way, because the newspapers have deemed them final girls. And so the first girl that this happened to, the first final girl, she's like reached out and tried to become friendly with the other 2 final girls who have been less willing to kind of take on that name for themselves like that first girl did. And when she ends up turning up dead, she turned up dead, the other 2 girls are like, oh, was someone after us? So the story is mainly about Quincy Carpenter, and she survived this brutal massacre of her friends in the woods. And then you also have Sam, who survived this killing at the Nightlight Inn, and the sack man ran around killing all the people who stayed there. And then you also have this other girl that survived, a sorority house. I can't remember her name and I can't find it, Lisa. So she lost 9 sorority sisters, and she was the only survivor. So you're introduced into Quincy's life. She's kind of put that stuff behind her. She doesn't want to be a final girl. She's like a baker online, and she has a fiance, and then the cop that rescued her that night so many years ago is also in her life as well. But when Sam, one of the other final girls, comes to meet her because of the Lisa being killed, then they kind of get together and they are trying to figure out what's real and what's actually happening. And it's not like I thought it was going to be. I definitely thought we were going to get a little bit more information on these moments that these girls were killed, like by the sack man and the sorority house and stuff. We really don't get much. I mean, we do get a little bit more of Quincy because she's our main character, but we don't really learn much about the sack man or the sorority murders, which I thought might be disappointing, but I actually liked the book. I mean, it did its job. It did what it was supposed to do. And so, yeah, I enjoyed this one. I thought it was fine for what it was, like the first page, I was like, oh, if it ends up being this, I'm going to be pretty mad. And it didn't turn out to be like that. So I was pretty happy about it. I mean, most of the stuff I feel like you could figure out pretty easily, but there were one or two twists and turns in there that I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, otherwise, I thought it was a fine book. I also liked, because if we're talking about these crimes, I also liked the different perspective on the crime taking place. So you have the victims, the final girls, and then you also have Quincy's fiance, or soon to be fiance, I think it's her boyfriend, who's a district attorney. And then you also have the police officer that rescued the victims. But you do kind of have different people who play a role in the lives of people who were involved in a crime. So I actually thought that that was kind of interesting. Otherwise, yeah, it's definitely more about Lisa and Sam's relationship and what kind of comes of their relationship. And it is, yeah, honestly an interesting book. I quite enjoyed it. Like, it was exactly what I needed for that time. You know what I mean? And my goodness, if there has been any month that I was happy to read Murder in the Mix books, it was this month. I just wanted something that was going to make me forget about stuff and just enjoy a night of reading. And that's exactly what this book did. They're getting quite a bit longer. This one's 360 pages. I think the other ones have 260 pages. Yeah, I think the other ones have been closer to 200, so I was excited that the book was a little bit longer in this case. This one is Lethal Lemon Bars. I'm not going to give you much information because the same thing happens in every book. There's a murder that takes place in this town. Well, first, Lottie Lemon, she's a baker in the town. First, she sees usually a dead pet, and so she knows somebody is gonna die, and that pet is there to kind of, I guess, help her solve the crime in a weird way and like get justice for its owner and help it kind of pass on to the other side. So she sees this dead pet, and she knows someone's gonna die, she ends up finding the dead body always. And a lot of the times it has something to do with her desserts. This time a lemon bar was involved. She is right now in the middle of a love triangle between two hunky stepbrothers. One is a judge and the other is a detective, and they're both like super hot muscular guys. And then we have been building up until this point, because I think this is maybe the 9th book. We've been building all of the characters in town. So her sisters and her mom and her best friend and her best friend's families and kind of all the characters in town. And so it's kind of cool having these characters kind of repeat and come back up. But another thing that I never really realized how much I enjoyed about this book is her kind of detective work, because she goes on to try to figure out who the killer is. And it is actually very interesting because you just go with her to interview people and you find out bits and pieces of information at the time. And although there are definitely some books where I'm like, oh, this person's the killer, there have been others that have surprised me. And it's cool because it's revealed little by little. And it's not like a lot of thriller books where if you just pay attention, it's all out there for you, and by page 20 you know who the killer is. Like this one, you really do have to read and get more information along with Lottie to put the pieces together with her. So I don't know, I also do actually really enjoy the thriller aspect of it and her just investigating these crimes. They're silly little stories, like I'm aware they're nothing groundbreaking or anything, but it was honestly just what I needed this month, so very thankful. I honestly almost read more than one, and I was like, no, you can't, because they're written to be for one every month of the year. So I'm like, no, you can't get ahead. You can't do it. The next one that I read was The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. And this one is actually a essay on suicide. So it's just his thoughts and ideas on suicide. And there are definitely some very beautiful passages that are mentioned in here. There are some really interesting just meditations on it. So there were a lot of things that I enjoyed about the book. However, because it's Albert Camus, he was a French philosopher, there's a lot of philosophical comments in here. There's a lot of other philosophers being mentioned and their work being mentioned. And because I don't know much about philosophy, I mean, really the only philosophical text that I've read a lot of was in college. We had to read this. No, this is John Milton. Sorry, it's this one here. Was this Theory and Criticism book that we had to read a lot of in college. But anyways, so this was kind of my only real introduction to philosophy. I didn't take any philosophy classes in college or anything. So anyways, because this was so heavy on other people's philosophies, I really didn't know much about them. And so there were definitely, like, I would definitely have to read this book multiple times to really get a grip of everything that's going on. But one thing that I did really like is he did use a lot of literary commentary as well. So with a literary aspect of it, he talks about Kafka, he talks about Shakespeare, and so those references I was a lot more comfortable with. But anyways, yeah, it was still an interesting book, an interesting, I don't know, it was cool to just sit and read a book that was published in 1955 and just think about this man sitting down and writing his ideas on suicide. I don't know, it was neat, and I rather enjoyed that one. And next up was Lisa Jewell's The Family Upstairs. I loved this book. I loved this book. I thought that this was great. I always leave my things in here. I've been looking for that one. I loved this book. I thought it was fantastic. So this is about a family. Well, it's, I guess before I say that, it's about a girl who, when she turns 25, gets notice that she has inherited this large, almost mansion. She was given up for adoption because her parents were involved in a suicide murder pact when she was 1 year old or something like that. Oh, geez. Yeah, Libby is the main character. So you get Libby, her information, but then you also get the past information of what actually happened in that house, because it was definitely like a mystery cult-like weird thing that was going on that nobody really knows the answers to. And then you also have this separate story of this other girl who's kind of down on her luck. She's homeless with 2 kids and she's just having a really rough time. And then eventually the characters and the story comes together. And yeah, I don't want to really give anything away, but I really enjoyed this. I thought that this was a really interesting book. And I have to say, I don't know what it is, but with this book and The Night She Disappeared, that other Lisa Jewell book that I read earlier this year, they seem older than they are. Like this book, I believe, takes place in the 80s, and I can't remember the night she disappeared. It might even be in the 2000s. They're not old books. And I don't know if it's because of the setting, because it's set in England, but just the way that the houses are described, and with the night she disappeared, with that one, it's like an old boarding school. And so my mind automatically goes like early 1900s, you know, even though that's not when the stories took place. And with the night she disappeared, for me, and it might have been just, it obviously is my fault, but my brain was just like trying to fit these pieces together of this old story, but it is actually a modern story. And so I think that's why that book I didn't love that book as much as her other books. But with this one, it didn't really matter when it took place, and although my brain kept telling me it was older than it was, I kept having to remind myself, no, this is just in the 80s. So I don't know. I don't know why that is, but let me know if you guys feel that way sometimes with reading her books, or if it's just me. But otherwise, I really enjoyed the story. I mean, I do think that she has a pretty compelling way of writing. The thing that I like about her books too is the big plot twists in the story, how they are in a lot of thrillers. They don't actually make a difference to the plot. So even if you figure out things, and I am not saying that I figured everything out in this book, but even if you figure things out, they're not like life-changing. They're just like, oh, okay, and then you move on. And I really like that about her, because her books shine because of her ability to write and engage you with just the storytelling, and she doesn't just rely on tropes and these big moments to make you gasp audibly to bring you into the story. And honestly, she's an impressive writer, and I really like her for thriller books. I think that they're awesome. The next one I read was The Stepford Wives by, I always pronounce his name wrong. Is it Ira or Ira? You guys always tell me that I pronounce it incorrectly. I think maybe Ira. Ira Levin. And this was my first time reading this. I have seen, I think, just maybe the newer movie that came out. I don't even think I've seen the original. So going into it, I thought I knew what this movie was about, but the book was actually a bit different. Okay, I did take a lot of notes on this, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a movie verse book on this, because I think my ideas about this book will surprise you, because I think I feel differently about this book than most people do. I really enjoyed it. But it's about this couple that moves to this town of Stepford, and the wife is noticing that the other wives in town seem to not really have much personalities themselves, and they seem to be just hung up on cleaning the house. Yeah, just obsessively cleaning the house and not really doing much else. And the particular wife that moves into the town doesn't want to end up like that. Like, she has her own things that make her a unique individual. But anyways, I was surprised how much I, one, enjoyed this book, but also how differently I felt about it after watching the movies and thinking that I knew what the story was about, and then I read it and got kind of a completely different perspective. So that will probably be a movieverse book that will come out in the next few weeks. The next one I read was Paradise Rot by Jenny Haval. Now, I would like to read you, if you don't mind, a few of the Goodreads comments, what do you call them? Ratings that were left on here. This one says, piss sexuality and the stench of rotting fruit. What more could you ask for? Moist mushroom head who pisses the bed. This one says, the feminist urge to rot. This one says, honestly, not as much piss as I expected. DNF. This one says, lots of piss. Loved it. Go Piss Girl, bisexual pee book. Yes, I read the reviews. The amount of piss still surprised me. So you get the idea, okay? There's a lot of urine discussion when it came to this book. And I gotta be honest with you, there's really not that much urine in here. Like, it really wasn't anything. It wasn't anything too crazy for me. I mean, everybody has their own level of urine, I suppose. But anyways, I wrote that it's like a surrealist fairy tale about sexuality. It's about this girl named Jo. She's part of this, I believe, exchange program. She's going to college in a new country. She doesn't know anyone. She ends up meeting this girl who stays in an old, I cannot say this word correctly, but brewery. And it's been kind of makeshift into this apartment, but the walls aren't even really walls, they're just kind of dividers, so even when you're in the bathroom you can kind of hear everything that's going on. So anyways, she starts living with this girl, and I don't want to go too crazy into it to, you know, give you too much information, but basically I think it is about sexuality, and that person did say it's a bisexual pee book, but I don't even know if that's the case. the main girl in the story, her name's Jo, and every interaction she has with a man is based on sex. It's like a man asking if that's what she wants to do, or hitting on her, or trying to use her in that manner. They're never deep relationships. And it's not until she meets this girl that they kind of unify into one being. So I don't know if it's necessarily about bisexuality or kind of finding where your sexuality fits into the world. It's also very interesting because, I mean, it's called Paradise Rot because they bring these apples into the apartment and the apples start to rot, and they bring up the myth of Adam and Eve. I don't know. They bring up that story of Adam and Eve, and they talk about how their apartment is Paradise Rot, which I have to assume is based off of like a play on words for Paradise Lost from John Milton, which is also about that story of Adam and Eve and like the creation of humans and the devil and God and all sorts of stuff. But anyways, and so yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing when you think about, because the story of Adam and Eve is obviously more about heterosexual relationships, and then you have this Paradise Rot that's about female relationships, and then you have this apartment that kind of turns into an ecosystem on its own. You have Jo, she's studying biology, I don't know why I said that so weird, and there's a comment in there about how biologists build their own worlds. And so there's this book was fucking cool, okay? I gotta admit, this book was fucking cool. Now, did I understand everything in there? No. And are there definitely some things in here that I would definitely love to read the book a few times to figure out? Like, for example, the urine. I don't know exactly where that fits in or why that was in there. I don't know. I truly don't. And I don't know that I fully grasped the concept of this whole, like, molds, ecosystem, bugs that are inside the apartment either, other than the parallels with, like, creating a paradise or the opposite of one. I also have to admit that because I thought that way about the book, that I don't really know quite how I feel about the ending of the book, but I don't know. There's a lot in here, and I thought it was just written very cool. It's a very surrealist feeling novel, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought it was neat. Oh, one other thing is there's also a story about a ghost at the brewery too, and there's a character that acts kind of weird, and so I think there's definitely multiple ways that you can, there's multiple ways you can look at any book, but there's a lot in here that I think you can kind of analyze for yourself and come to your own conclusions. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of interesting things in here. Oh, also the roommate, Carol, reads erotic literature, and it's very hot and steamy, man on woman, like, his gorging member, like that kind of stuff. And so that was definitely an interesting juxtaposition between the two girls' relationship, because there's nothing sexual going on between them. Like, they just cuddle and become one almost. Yeah, I don't know. It was a really fucking interesting book. I just wrote that it seemed to me like an analogy for coming to terms with your own sexuality, even if it's different from heterosexuality. Now, the next book that I read was this one, Into Their Arms by Thomas More. And this was the perfect book to read after Paradise Rot, and I will tell you why. Because that is about the relationship between women. This is about the relationship between men. So you have a gay male character, and you get to see him, it's told through his perspective, and also like internet conversations and stuff as well, kind of like forums and Twitter pages and blog posts and things like that. But he's like our only main character. He's also a nameless male character. In fact, I don't think that there are any characters named in the book, actually. I think that they're all nameless, kind of faceless characters, which also is very intriguing. But it's a really interesting juxtaposition from this book, because whereas this one, it was a connection between women that was deeper than sex, this is only about sex. And it's just about filling a void for these men. It's not about connection. It has nothing to do with liking the person. It's just, oh my gosh, very detailed and very unmonogamous. That's what I will say. But it is about like sex, loneliness, confusion, nihilism, sadness. And our narrator is also unreliable at times, so I don't know if he's really a reliable narrator at all. There's also such cold, formal interactions between characters, like, hey, people that I've never met before, hey, come over, where are you? Here's my address, come now. And that's all they need to engage in these activities. So the main character meets men online, and he kind of internet stalks his ex partner that he has slept with, not like a committed partner, but somebody that he has slept with before. He also kind of looks up this Tumblr page of a girl that he met. And it's also interesting because it does remind you of like a Dennis Cooper or even Bret Easton Ellis book, and not just because there are gay men in those books, but because of the way it's written, the nihilism and the way that these characters act. But I wrote in here that in the Dennis Cooper book I read, the sex was deliberately gross, like it was told to kind of gross you out. It was unsexy, you know? And these acts of sex are so impersonal and removed, and they lack connections. It's so interesting reading these books. I really freaking liked this one. So I wrote that this one was poignant, bleak, dark, and beautifully haunting. And that's honestly how I feel about it. And obviously, like, spoiler alert, not a gay man, so I don't know anything about like this being the life of a gay man. Like, I have no idea the implications on this about gay relationships at all, but I do think that there are definitely comments in there like, you know, having to meet people online or having to go to like specific gay bars to meet partners and things like that. So I don't know, it was really interesting, and I didn't know how the book was going to go because I've never read that author before. But before anybody picks it up, just know that it is very detailed in the sex department. So if that's not something that you're into, like not necessarily erotic, but like multiple people doing their thing, you know? So just be aware of that. I'm also going to leave the link of the website that has this book, the like printer, because they do have tons of LGBTQ stories on there. So I'm gonna leave that in case any of you would like that website as any sort of reference to purchase books, because that one was really fucking cool. I really enjoyed that. Yeah, wow. I've been reading a lot of differing books, and pretty cool. Like, most of these books were 4 stars for me. I think, yeah, honestly, most of them. It was just The Myth of Sisyphus that I didn't know quite how to rate, because it's not like a novel, you know? It was just told in a different way that I felt like didn't require stars on a rating system, you know? It was just kind of like a meditation on someone's ideas. So those are the books that I read this month. Oh, I also read another one, but that's going to be in a separate video, so I'm not even going to mention it. You'll see that soon. But thank you so much for watching. I would super appreciate if you let me know what books you read this month, particularly ones that you were super interested in. Let me know what you think about these. I think I said thank you so much for watching, but thanks again, and I will see you soon with another horror video. Bye, guys!
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.